President's nominee to serve as Deputy Secretary of the Department of Veterans Affairs. Ms. Bradsher, I want to first acknowledge your service to this country, both in uniform and in government service. This includes your national security and public engagement work at the White House, your public affairs work at the Defense Health Agency, and at the Department of Homeland Security, and your tenure supporting our nation's veterans at the VA. I'm especially proud to welcome you before a committee as the first woman nominated to this top position, a crucial moment for our nation's veterans and our country. Today, we will determine whether you're the right person to be the VA Deputy Secretary. If confirmed, you will have specific accountability to manage several large programs, including the big one, electronic health records, which has been an area of major concern to this committee, and I think you know that. You also have broad responsibility for strengthening the DoD-VA collaboration as the agency works to implement the PACT Act. In your role as Chief Operating Officer, you will run the day-to-day operations of the department, a position for which you have prepared by serving as the VA's Chief of Staff. I expect the committee is going to want to know what you've learned in this role, how you've helped improve the delivery of health care and benefits to veterans, and your plans for the department moving forward. And while the electronic health record will take up a good portion of your time, VA needs a leader who will not lose sight of the other critical management responsibilities and service delivery functions of the department. The bottom line is the VA needs a Deputy Secretary who will improve collaboration and communication across the health benefits, cemetery administrations, and Chief Operating Officer, all while ensuring those three entities are meeting the needs of veterans and their families. I hope your answers to the members' inquiries on these matters will help this committee make the determination whether you are the right person to be confirmed as Deputy Secretary. I very much look forward to our dialogue today, and I want to thank you for your willingness to serve in this very, very important role. With that, I will turn it over to Senator Moran for his comments.
Chairman Tester, thank you very much. Ms. Bradsher, welcome. Start by saying how much I appreciate the many years you've spent in service to our country, particularly in the United States Army. I'm grateful for your since leaving the Army, that you have spent your time serving in the White House and the House of Representatives and now the Department of Veterans Affairs. On this committee, we know that military service is family service, and in some ways, high-level government service is family service as well. And so I also want to recognize your mother, Linda, your husband, John, and your three girls, Charlotte, Catherine, and Christine. Thank you all for being here. It was nice to shake most of your hands. Thank you. The role of Deputy Secretary of the Department of Veterans Affairs is a tremendously important one. The Deputy Secretary serves as the VA's Chief Operating Officer and leads the electronic health record modernization effort, which we have needed leadership and which we've been working on for a long time. That project is at a critical juncture now. If confirmed to this position, Ms. Bradsher, millions of veterans, caregivers, survivors, and dependents across the globe will be counting on you to deliver the timely and high-quality health care, benefits, and services that they need. Hundreds of thousands of VA staff members will be counting on you as well to provide high-performing, safe, and accountable place for them to come to work each and every day. I want to hear this afternoon how your experience has prepared you to take on these responsibilities and how you would achieve success where your would-be predecessors have struggled. I also want to hear how you would make certain that the actions you take and decisions you make, if confirmed to this position, would put the needs and interests of veterans above any other consideration. That includes making certain that VA officials from the Secretary and the Deputy Secretary on down to the newest entry-level staffer in a VA medical facility, regional office, or cemetery follow both the letter and the intent of the laws of Congress, and that they are responsive and transparent to veterans and their families, and with this committee and with our colleagues in the Senate and House. I'll be listening to your testimony this afternoon, and I know my fellow committee members as well. Thank you again for being here and for your willingness to be considered for this role. Chairman Tester, I yield back.
Tanya, I'd like you to stand and raise your right hand as you receive the oath of office. Do you, Tanya Bradsher, solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony that you're about to give before the U.S. Senate Committee on Veterans Affairs will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Let the record reflect that the nominee answered in the affirmative. Hang on for just a second. Okay, well, we're going to do this a little differently than what we had planned. The good senator from Illinois, Senator Duckworth, will be here to introduce you, but she's going to introduce you after you get done with your opening statement. You may proceed. And by the way, I would love to have you, if it's not in your opening remarks, introduce your family so we know who's who.
Absolutely.
Because with 3 girls, I get the names confused. Okay.
Absolutely. Senator, I have with me my mom, Linda Keene, my daughter, Charlotte Bradsher, my husband, John Bradsher, my middle daughter, Catherine Bradsher, and my youngest, Christine Bradsher. Chairman Tester, Ranking Member Moran, and distinguished members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify before you today and for your dedication to veterans. And thank you, Senator Duckworth. Oops, she's not here yet. I would like to take a moment to express my gratitude to my family, friends, colleagues, and mentors, to my late father, Sergeant First Class Vaughn Keene, and my mom, Linda Keene. You've always been my guiding lights. To my husband of 25 years, retired Colonel John Bradsher, and our 3 daughters, Charlotte, Catherine, and Christine. Your love and unwavering support as we have served in Colorado, Korea, the Pentagon, and both of our deployments to Iraq mean everything to me. And to my uncle, late grandpas and great-grandpa who served in World War I, World War II, and the Korean War, your service and sacrifice will never be forgotten. As a 4th-generation Army soldier, it is a true honor to be nominated by President Biden and Secretary McDonough to serve as Deputy Secretary of the Department of Veterans Affairs. Our mission at VA is to care for those who have served in our nation's military and for their families, caregivers, and survivors. I know the importance of this mission firsthand, not only because I've served as VA's Chief of Staff for the past 2+ years, but because I've lived it. I've seen what it looks like when one of my fellow soldiers transitions out of the military and gets the support they deserve from the VA, how they live happier, healthier, and more fulfilled lives. But I've also seen what it looks like when that doesn't happen. With my own dad, who didn't get the support he needed, and who, because of that, never quite found his way after 22 years of honorable service. Simply put, I know that VA can make all the difference in the world for our nation's heroes. I know that it's VA's job to ensure that no veteran ever slips through the cracks. And I promise you that if I'm confirmed as Deputy Secretary, I will do everything in my power to ensure that every veteran gets the world-class care and benefits they deserve. Fortunately, throughout my life, I've been blessed with opportunities and experiences that have helped prepare me for this role. During my time at the VA, I know what it takes for VA to deliver more care and more benefits to more veterans than ever before. From my 27 years of public service in Congress, the military, and the executive branch, under Republican and Democratic leadership, I've come to understand the critical nature of the partnership between the Hill and the VA. And from my deployment, I've even seen firsthand the importance of the PACT Act. I was exposed to burn pits within Iraq, and I'm so grateful that because of you, veterans' toxic exposures are now recognized and cared for. The bottom line is, during each of those experiences, I've strived to live with compassion and integrity, creating teams that perform well under pressure and above all else deliver. And that's exactly what I hope to do as Deputy Secretary, deliver for veterans. To that end, I have 3 primary goals if confirmed. First, I will focus on transition. We need to ensure that our military service members have access to all the tools that they need before they depart the service. Second, I'll ensure to continue to build an electronic health record system that improves care for veterans, and we will only deploy it when it is fully ready. And third, I will continue to build or rebuild trust with veterans. I want to ensure that VA is reaching untethered veterans, veterans who've never come to VA before, and getting them care and benefits, including through the PACT Act. As Deputy Secretary, I would do all of that and more with one North Star in mind, the same North Star that Secretary McDonough set forth when he was confirmed, to fight like hell for veterans, their families, caregivers, and survivors, because they deserve the very best. Thank you again for considering my nomination and for your partnership. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you for your statement. I will yield to the senior senator of the Senate, Senator Murray.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And Ms. Bradsher, thank you for being here. And thank you for your service. Thank you to our everything you've done for our country. Thank you to your family for allowing you to do this, and for, I know, all the sacrifices they have to make in order for you to do this, because it really is an important role. So thank you. I want to start by talking about what I know will be a very large focus for you if you're confirmed to this role, and that is the electronic health record modernization. Now, as you know, the staff in Spokane and Walla Walla, where the EHR has been deployed, has really worked hard and tirelessly to learn this new system. And as you know, it has really put a strain on our providers and on our veterans. They are the current experts on this system, but I continue to hear from people on the ground in my communities that their feedback is not being taken into account or even heard. So I wanted to ask you, in this role, you will have the responsibility to oversee EHR implementation and make sure we get this right. How will you make sure that our veterans themselves and the providers are being heard and their feedback is actually taken into account during this modernization effort?
Senator, thank you very much for that question. First and foremost, the Deputy Secretary is ultimately responsible for the electronic health care record, and if confirmed, that responsibility will fall fully on my shoulders. First and foremost, we have to ensure that our veterans get the health care record they need. When I retired, I hand-carried my medical records from the Pentagon to my VSO, and we simply have to have an electronic health care record that our veterans can rely on. So first and foremost, going out, boots on the ground is how I've always led. Go to all 5 sites, listen to our veterans, do listening sessions, along with listening to our clinicians. I agree with you. Our clinicians have not seen the results of their comments come back and executed within the electronic health care record. So we have the opportunity now to, with the reset of the 5 sites, make sure that we're able to incorporate those recommendations enterprise-wide, because we can't have 5 different records. We need to have enterprise-wide changes and ensure that we hold Cerner Oracle accountable so that those changes actually happen, and then be able to make those changes and also scale to a large, because right now we're at medium and small facilities. We need to be able to also scale it to a large facility.
And as you mentioned, we are in a reset. And I just want to know how you're going to use your oversight role during this reset period to make sure we can deliver the care that we have promised.
Thank you, Senator. First and foremost, what we have with the reset is being able to hold Oracle Cerner. We have a much stronger, 30 times stronger penalties, so for any challenges we have.
In the new contract.
In the new contract, I'm sorry. On May 16th, we have a new contract. Also, we have 5 one-year contracts. That allows us to hold them accountable each year and to make sure that we set those markers that we need for them and then go to the next contract. So those are the 2 great changes that we have with this new contract that will allow us to hold them accountable. And also, the changes that we will make don't just benefit VA, they'll also benefit DOD, and being able to ensure, especially with the outages, we've had definitely some issues with consistency in keeping the system up. We now have much tougher penalties for those outages.
Okay, well, as you know, I will be in very close touch with you on this. We worked through it, but I just want to make it very clear, staffing cuts are unacceptable, and I hope and expect for there to be a timely resolution to the concerns on the ground from the providers that we're hearing about that as well.
Yes, Senator, if confirmed.
And just real quickly, as you know, women make up nearly 17% of active duty military forces and 19% of National Guard and Reserves. That number is rising. Talk to us about how you're going to use your role to make sure that VA is accessible and responsible to our women veterans.
Thank you, Senator. Even this nomination hearing right now is historic, and if confirmed to serve as Deputy Secretary, I would take reaching out to all veterans first and foremost, but especially for our women veterans. I have met so many women in the last couple of years who don't recognize their own service, who minimize their time, who tell me, I only did 4 years, my husband did 20, and they'll fight for their husband's benefits, but more than they fight for their own, or they won't even acknowledge their own service. So one of the things is being creative, reaching out to platforms that VA has not touched into before, and I hope if given the opportunity, that would be the first and foremost, is doing that outreach.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Senator.
Senator Moran.
Chairman, thank you. Ms. Bradsher, tell me how your nomination came about. What happened at the Department of Veterans Affairs? What was the secretary? What was the process by which you were chosen to be the nominee?
Senator, Deputy Secretary Remy had let the secretary know that he was looking to move on. And so the secretary asked me if I would be interested in serving. And I told him yes. And then the White House worked it from there.
Pretty straightforward. Let me ask a couple of process questions. If you are confirmed, do you agree to testify before this committee and our counterpart committees in the House, whenever you are asked to testify?
Yes, Senator.
If confirmed, do you agree to make certain that the requests for information from Congress are fully responded to in a timely manner without regard to political party or committee status?
Yes, Senator.
Thank you for that answer. If confirmed, this is now a substantive question. If confirmed, would you commit to preserving or expanding the access to care that veterans have currently, including the options given to them under the Mission Act and the existing access standards, and to take no action that would restrict a veteran's ability to choose the provider and care setting of their choice and make their own health care decisions?
Yes, Senator. If confirmed, I will definitely look into being able to expand the care for our veterans as much as possible.
I want to highlight I'm not trying to trick you into answering a question differently than you want to answer it, but I'm trying to make certain that you have an appreciation for the value of the Mission Act and its ability to serve veterans in rural and other circumstances, special need care. And so the crux of that question I'll ask in this way. I want to make certain that you will work to preserving and expanding the access to that care under the Mission Act.
Yes, Senator, I will.
Thank you. And is there anything that, and let me do one more. If you were confirmed, this is important. I often hear I bring a complaint or concern to the Department of Veterans Affairs, and I get an answer that's certainly pleasing to me. There's a problem will be solved, something that's being incorrectly handled at home or someplace else across the country is occurring. Policy doesn't work well. The VA, the leadership offices here tell me that it's been corrected. I then discover that that communication apparently hasn't occurred back to the state of Kansas or to the local VA hospital. So I would indicate that there's a significant opportunity for the VA to make certain that the decisions it makes here in Washington, D.C., which I hope are informed by input from those at home, but once the decision is made, a correction has occurred, that the folks at the local community health clinic, the folks at the VA hospital, that they then, and the folks in the benefit world, that they then conduct themselves based upon the policies that I've been told are corrections that they've been made. So if confirmed, how would you help break down the silos between the VA central office in Washington, D.C. and VA entities across the country to make certain that the directives from program offices and leadership officials are responsive to the needs of and faithfully executed by the field staff?
Senator, thank you very much. If confirmed, one of the areas, obviously, and you see Secretary McDonough, who's on the road today, going out in the field is the absolute best way to get that real-world information and making sure that the policies we are setting are actually being executed on the ground. Obviously, we can't get to everything immediately. So one other way that I want to break down the silos is similar to what I've done as Chief of Staff, and that is I have taken all the chiefs across the administrations and the directorates, and we meet weekly to have conversations to make sure that implementation, best practices, any issues that we're able to handle at the lowest level possible. I want to replicate that same platform across the deputies and being able to ensure that we're getting that information down. But relying and having an open door for you, for our staff, and for our leadership to make sure that we stay that communication piece. It is definitely a challenge with 427,000, but it has worked so far with the chiefs, I'd like to try it also with the deputies.
The question I ask makes sense to you. I mean, the circumstances I described, you would understand that they happen too frequently. That makes sense to you? Yeah. I would indicate that what I generally know about the concerns and needs of veterans is what I hear when I'm walking down the street, or the email that I get, the conversations I had on Memorial Day. And it is important, one, to make certain that when a correction, a solution is found, that it's actually implemented. So it's not just conversation to me, we've taken care of the problem. And then secondly, usually those problems are something that's experienced by many other veterans. It's not an isolated, in many instances, it's not an isolated instance, and we need to make certain that the rest of the VA across the country is complying with the fix. Again, that makes sense to you?
Yes, Senator, it does.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Moran. We have now been joined by the Honorable Senator from Illinois. Senator Duckworth, you have the floor for a post-introduction.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I apologize for being a little bit late. Would never have happened in the Army. Happens all the time in the Senate, though, unfortunately. Chairman Tester and Ranking Member Moran, thank you for the opportunity to speak before the Senate Committee on Veterans Affairs today. I am so deeply honored to introduce today's historic nominee, Ms. Tanya Bradsher, who is nominated to be Deputy Secretary of the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs. In a moment, you're going to hear her explain why she answered the President's call to help lead the VA in fulfilling one of our nation's most sacred obligations, caring for America's veterans, their families, caregivers, and survivors. But first, I'd like to address why Ms. Bradsher is the right choice to help lead the VA as we seek to modernize the department to best serve multiple generations of veterans. Like many military families, including mine, the history of military service in Ms. Bradsher's family runs back generations, both on her father's side, where she is a fourth-generation soldier, and on her mother's side, where her grandfather's service so inspired her mother that her mother was the driving force behind the nominee's military service. In fact, a mom encouraging her daughter to speak with recruiters, and in turn, Ms. Bradsher's mother supported her daughter's family when Ms. Bradsher deployed to Iraq. Like her mom, Ms. Bradsher is also a military spouse, and she raised her children while on active duty as well. In fact, Ms. Bradsher was pregnant with her second of her 3 daughters and in the Pentagon on 9/11 itself. Ms. Bradsher and her family has never shied away from serving our great nation. In the course of her service, she earned numerous awards, including the Legion of Merit and the Bronze Star, among other commendations. I mention these achievements and attributes not just because they outline her unique experience, but because they demonstrate how her own service in uniform enables her to understand the challenges facing today's generations of post-9/11 veterans. As veterans of the Afghanistan and Iraq wars continue to grow older, the VA must proactively reach out to these veterans and bring them into the VA system. Though some veterans may minimize their service or shift focus to others they may see as more deserving, we need to make sure that the VA properly recognizes historically underserved veteran populations and draw them in. Our VA must serve all who served. Tanya Bradsher is just the combat veteran to make that happen. Though it's not the reason for her nomination, if confirmed, Ms. Bradsher would be the highest-ranking woman veteran at the VA ever. The first woman veteran, the first woman combat veteran, the first woman of color to be Deputy Secretary of Veterans Affairs. Public servants like Ms. Bradsher don't take on these challenges. They don't answer this call because they want to be a first, or in Ms. Bradsher's case, many firsts. Though she may pave a path for those who come later, it is a selfless commitment to serving others that motivates people like Tanya Bradsher. For the past 2 years, she has served as the department's chief of staff as the VA delivered an unprecedented level of benefits and health care services to our veterans and began to implement the historic PACT Act. I'm proud to introduce Ms. Bradsher today, and I am confident that she is ready to serve as Deputy Secretary. Thank you again for this opportunity, Mr. Chairman, and I strongly urge this committee to support this impressive and patriotic nominee. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Duckworth, for that kind remarks about the nominee, and you're welcome to stay as long as you would like. We might even throw you in for a few questions if you really want.
I don't know. My adult supervision's right here, and they're probably going to pull me. But
All right. I will now take chairman's privilege. Sorry, Senator Hassan, and recognize Senator Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. 2 American heroes sitting in front of us, so thank you both for serving in slightly different capacities, but serving this country. So thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman mentioned the PACT Act, as did Senator Duckworth. When we talked earlier, Ms. Bradshaw, on the phone, you told me about a conversation with a young veteran, a woman whom you met in a store, who told you that she, quote, used to be a veteran. Talk to us, if you would, how we help ensure that veterans, particularly women veterans, understand the VA is there for them. I hear repeatedly from people from the roundtables I do in the PACT Act that, well, somebody else deserves it more than I do. I don't really need these benefits. So talk about that.
Thank you, Senator. There are so many veterans who, for many reasons, think that if they apply for their benefits, then it's taking benefits from someone else. And the only way I've been successful in getting them to at least listen a little bit is for them to realize that it's also for their families. Veterans definitely have a mission and purpose, and they have that from the military. And when they get out, some of them really have these misperceptions on what the VA offers. And so working through that, the PACT Act has been helpful. We've been able to have unprecedented numbers. We're at a 30% increase for claims, and we're also seeing a great uptick for the toxic exposures. But we still have veterans who think that because they didn't go to war, they don't qualify for VA. We have women veterans who think that because they only served one term, that they don't qualify for the VA. And, you know, I know you talked about the roundtables that you're doing, Senator, at home. I do the same thing. I go out and speak as much as possible, and I'm always surprised at how many women just do not recognize the service that they have provided, and they minimize it. And so it is definitely a challenge. But even I did a roundtable at church, and I had a gentleman who had a Navy hat on, and I said, well, have you applied for PACT Act? And he said, no, I can't apply for VA because I never went to war. And I said, what do you mean? Of course you did. How many years? And he said 7 years in the Navy. I said, well, 7 years, you definitely qualify. But even, and I won't mention any of the members, even staff who have served here, who have deployed to Kuwait, didn't realize that her time in Kuwait, even though she's a guardsman, qualifies her for PACT Act. It's a conversation and working through and trying to figure out unique ways to communicate with our veterans. It can't just be through just MSOs and VSOs. We're going to have to get creative, and we're going to have to reach the veterans where they are.
Thank you, and thank you for that answer, Ms. Bradshaw. You had talked about your own transition. I know Senator Murray had asked about that too, from service to veteran status, if you will. And I'm particularly concerned about veterans' mental health during the transition process. We're working on legislation. I would just like a commitment from you, if you would pledge to work with us on that bill.
Yes, Senator, if confirmed, I would.
Thank you. Last question. Senator Murray talked about the problems with the rollout. We know that the botched electronic record rollout has contributed to 4 veterans' deaths. I'm glad the VA is taking the right steps to fix the system. We obviously must prevent these kinds of incidents. However, while VA works towards these changes, there are 5 VAs still working in the current system. You, of course, know that. One of those is in Columbus. I've had extensive conversations with the Secretary of the VA about this. Tell us, if you would, what steps you'll take to protect veterans getting care from the VA that are currently using Oracle Cerner while working through the necessary fixes.
Senator, first and foremost, making sure that our clinicians there know that we have that we will support them, and that also any of the changes that they are seeing, that we now, through Dr. Evans and through our leadership with the electronic healthcare record team, being able to address those issues so that we can quickly look at resolution, especially dealing with downtime. That seems to be a challenge that we're still working through. So keeping those open lines of communication, making sure those 5 locations have the support that they need to be able to continue to execute to take care of our veterans, because that's the most important mission that we have.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. And Senator Hassan, thank you.
Senator Tuberville.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Bradford, thank you for being here today, and enjoyed our time visiting yesterday. That was very good. Thank you for your service and your husband's service and your entire family's service. And you got a beautiful family.
Thank you, Senator.
And I know you're proud of them. So I know you're glad they're here supporting you today. That's important. For this committee to act as an effective oversight entity for taxpayers, the VA must act in an open and transparent manner. I have experienced in the last few years several instances, and we talked about this, of the VA not providing data and information I have requested in a timely manner, though questions from the record, formal letters, and otherwise, other things. As Deputy Secretary, do you commit to righting these errors and working with me and my staff, providing information so we can work together?
Yes, Senator, if confirmed.
Thank you. A majority of your career has involved strategic communications and outreach. As Assistant Secretary of Public Affairs, as the Department of Homeland Security, you oversaw public outreach for the entire department. And prior to that, when you worked at the White House, you served as Assistant Director of the Office of Public Engagement, where you led veteran, wounded warrior, and military family outreach initiatives. Given your decades of experience in communication and engagement, how involved have you been in the VA's strategy to educate and reach veterans on the PACT Act? You talked a little bit about that, but kind of explain a little bit. How will you help with that?
I do my best to stay out of Assistant Secretary Fulton's hair. It's really hard since I had that job over at DHS, Senator. But we've taken a broad, we have a strategic outreach, we have the Assistant Secretary of Public Affairs, but we've really looked at PACT Act as our main mission across the department, and making sure, because of the deadline of August 9th, we want to make sure that all veterans know about the PACT Act. So between outreach with our veteran service organizations, our all of our various platforms, and outreach, we have done something unprecedented for us. We have done over hundreds of events across the country in order to make sure that our veterans know about the PACT Act.
The PACT Act included a one-year open enrollment period for the post-9/11 combat.
Yes,
veterans.
Senator.
You know,
So it'll be back, so
Yeah.
they can backdate the claim to August 10th of 2022.
Yeah. So 10 years past the separation from service of 9/11, that one-year period will end on September 30th. I'm concerned that the VA still does not have a mechanism to track the veterans who have enrolled under the authority thus far. You know, why 9 months after such significant legislation has passed does the VA not have a better way to track these people?
Senator, I think part of the challenge is we have some that file for PACT Act, and they'll also file for other claims that they had that may not be directly PACT Act related. And then we have others who have seen the press from the PACT Act who may not be impacted directly from the PACT Act, but have decided to go ahead and apply. And so that's part of the challenge, is pulling those together. But we do have some data in regards to how many PACT Act claims we've received so far.
You know, how many veterans were eligible to enroll under the one-year open enrollment period when the PACT Act was enacted? How many of them have enrolled at this point, do you think?
We had 3 million we think are eligible. My understanding is we're about 800,000 have enrolled so far.
What steps is the VA taking to improve this tracking process that you know of veterans that haven't enrolled?
Continued outreach, Senator. You know, trying to reach out to our untethered veterans, our Veteran Experience Office, trying to do as many events as possible and looking for new ways to be able to reach our veterans.
You had an interesting story yesterday about your burn pit experience in Afghanistan, correct?
Iraq.
About jogging, you know, and I would hope in the future, and I've talked to Secretary Austin about this, about burn pits being close to our camps and things like that. Could you tell your story there about your jogging? And
Absolutely. I picked up a horrible time to pick up running, and so I was at Diwaniyah, which is in Iraq, and the burn pit was located right in the center. And so as you would run, you would basically run around the burn pit, but it wasn't just that, it was also going to the talk, going to get chow. Anytime you would always go by the burn pits, but runs were really tough because you were out there for the longest time, or at least I was. And so your eyes would water, and then after your shower, you would spend the next 5 minutes coughing and getting the gunk out that you breathed in while you were running.
I can imagine how many veterans we have today that's having those problems.
Yes,
And
Senator.
hopefully we can help them with the PACT Act. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to our nominee. Ms. Bradshaw, I really appreciate your service. I appreciate your family and their support of your service as well. And before I turn to my questions, I just want to let you know I really enjoyed our visit in my office a couple of weeks ago, I think it was, and our discussion about the difficulties that New Hampshire is having with its aging VA infrastructure. And I just will continue to follow up with you and Secretary McDonough to ensure that those critical updates to the Manchester VA Medical Center are completed as quickly as possible. It's on the minds of all of the veterans in New Hampshire. I also wanted to just start my questions by thanking you for all of your discussion of and talking about the PACT Act. I'm glad we were able to pass it last summer. As you know and have talked about, it allows veterans to access more veterans accessing more benefits that they have earned and deserved. In New Hampshire alone, since the passage of the PACT Act, veterans have already filed more than 2,000 PACT Act-related claims, and more than 1,200 veterans have enrolled in VA health care. In your testimony, you highlighted the importance of the new benefits provided under the PACT Act, as well as the need to reach out to veterans who have never come to the VA before. So you've talked a little bit with Senator Tuberville and others about this, but how will you ensure, if you are confirmed, that all veterans are able to access their health care and benefits under the PACT Act?
Senator, thank you so much, and I enjoyed our conversation as well. First and foremost, we have been able, but we still have to do more, working through our public affairs office, our outreach offices, and also just continuing to do the events. But we also need to hit the major platforms. We need to get creative. We need to talk to Peloton, and we need to be able to get to the women's magazines for our ladies, and we need to talk about cars and be able to get VA in those different niches where we're going to find veterans who may or may not get their American Legion magazine. Not that I get my American Legion magazine, I should say that up front. But we just need to go beyond just our VSOs and getting super creative.
Well, please also feel free to reach out to us so we can be part of that creative work with you, because we just know how important it is to our veterans. Your nomination is a truly historic opportunity, as Senator Duckworth has noted, to bring the perspective of a woman veteran to top leadership within the VA. So I want to bring to your attention an example of the importance of that perspective. Some women veterans who served on cultural support teams in Afghanistan have faced challenges in getting their combat engagements documented in their service records and getting their injuries recognized by the VA. These women served an important role in ensuring that our special forces were able to communicate with local Afghan women. We needed our women in the field there in combat situations to make that communication happen. Yet upon returning home, they received little recognition for their role in combat. Many struggle still to get support for the injuries that they sustained during their service. How will you ensure that the VA learns from the perspective of veterans like these women and addresses the obstacles that they face in accessing health care and benefits?
Senator, if confirmed, and quite frankly, even in my current role, I would love to meet with them to look for what the challenges they're having and what they're finding that PACT Act doesn't cover, because that's the piece. You know, we have 27 presumptives that really have 276 conditions.
Right.
And so if there's areas that we're not able to cover them.
So forgive me for interrupting. Well, the issue here is that their work as cultural support teams isn't being documented in their record as combat service.
Gotcha.
So that, and I think it would be great to facilitate this conversation in this meeting, but this is where I think having women in leadership is so critically important for the mission of the VA.
Yes, Senator.
Okay. And lastly, as we discussed when we met, We both understand the importance of a successful transition process for service members separating from military service. Last year, my bipartisan Solid Start Act was passed into law, which makes sure that the VA's Solid Start program will continue to be a resource for service members when they're leaving active duty. I continue to believe that the VA can do more to connect veterans to their VA benefits and their local community support networks during this critical period of just such enormous change. And you've talked about it a little bit, but if confirmed, how will you work to support veterans during this transition?
For transition, we have to reach our veterans much sooner, Senator. They should understand what they're entitled to for the VA. And it's also a little confusing when you have Department of Labor for one piece, VA for another, and DOD for transition. And so, if confirmed, I would love to work with all three, with the DOD and Department of Labor, to ensure that we get one-stop shopping for our veterans, because it can be really confusing when you're not sure exactly what you're looking for.
Right.
And we need all those resources in one location.
Okay. Thank you very much, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Hassan, and thank you for your flexibility. Look, many of the questions that I'm going to bring up, you've already touched on already, but I'm going to start at the beginning. You have a admirable background in both military and civilian service. You are currently Chief of Staff of the VA, which isn't exactly a job of chopped liver. It's pretty damn important. Why do you want this job?
Senator, being in a Senate-confirmed position, I can help more veterans. And I've thoroughly enjoyed being Chief of Staff, but being able to implement in ways that, as Chief of Staff, I influence would, I think, would be a wonderful opportunity. And at the end of the day, I just want to take care of veterans. And I can take care of more veterans as deputy than I can as chief.
Okay. This committee, on a bipartisan basis, has pushed the department to hold Oracle Cerner more accountable and secure an EHR contract that not only works for our veterans, but also works for VA medical personnel and the American taxpayer. It's already been pointed out, a new contract, I believe, middle of May 16th, was signed. Can you tell us about this new contract? Did you have any, are you familiar with it?
Senator, I'm familiar with it, but I was not part of the negotiations.
That's fine. Can you tell me how this contract puts VA in a better position from an accountability standpoint?
Yes, Senator, absolutely. The original contract was a 5-year contract, so we didn't have the ability to bring Cerner, or now Oracle Cerner, back to the drawing board until every 5 years. The changes that they made under Acting Deputy Secretary Guy Kiyakawa and the leadership team with Dr. Evans is to be able to have 5 one-year contracts. So every year we can hold Oracle Cerner accountable. Second, the penalties are now 30 times greater for outages, and they're now incremental versus just a day. So we have the ability to hold Oracle Cerner accountable in ways that the previous contract did not.
You came out of the military. You, your husband did too. You guys understand how this outfit works. When it comes to electronic health records or the PACT implementation, you are very much dependent on the DOD to do good work for you to do good work. And I will say this, you didn't say this, sometimes the DOD kind of bigfoots you guys out of the road. You, as Deputy Secretary, would serve as co-chair of the VA DOD Joint Executive Committee. That joint committee, recently made the development and implementation of the individual longitudinal exposure record its #1 priority, and thank God, because it's critically important if we're going to get decent PACT Act implementation. Thinking back to your previous times, thinking to this position, how could DOD be more engaged in this interagency process as it pertains to PACT Act implementation, and how you, as Deputy Secretary, could force them to be more accountable to the veteran?
Thank you very much for the question, Chairman. If confirmed to serve as Deputy Secretary, I would hope to work with the JEC to be able to interact with all service members who have deployed so that they have PACT Act information before they ever get out of the military. We really need to have them identified so that they are able to understand what PACT Act is, what those presumptives are, and how VA can assist them so that when it's time for them to go, when it's time for them to transition, be it they retire or they get out, they know the next step is us. And that we're going to not only be able to take care of them, but take the research that we're able to get from EILER and also make sure that we can take care of these veterans, not just right when they get out, but throughout their lives. The other piece is to focus on how we can work with the electronic healthcare record, making sure that the interoperability, that we're able to work through that, so the smooth transition as much as possible when we're able to expand Oracle Cerner beyond just the first 5 sites. The other piece is facilities. How do we look at facilities to get VA access to some of the military facilities so that we're able to have our physicians there, share space, be able to take care. Maybe we partner in ways where we can also take care of active duty while taking care of retirees simultaneously. We have some very unique opportunities.
So on this joint executive committee, you're going to be dealing probably with people that have a few stars on their shoulder and maybe many stars on their shoulder. Does that intimidate you?
No, Senator.
Good. Senator hasn't talked about this. Senator King is also very passionate about it, the transition. We've had a bunch of hearings on transition. You've probably watched most of them on TV. But one thing that is absolutely obvious to me is that if we don't do a better job of transition, we're never going to get our arms around the veteran suicide issue.
I agree.
The transition starts long before they get out of the military. Once again, getting back to the Joint Executive Committee, how do you intend to use that position to influence the military, who, by the way, his main job is to go out and fight and win, to influence them to put attention to transition? And as I believe you've already pointed out, early transition is key. Talk to me about how you're going to get this done.
Senator,
Because we talk about suicide almost every meeting in some form or another. It is a huge issue.
Yeah.
Losing one soldier to suicide is too many, and we're losing a hell of a lot more than one. And so how do you deal with this issue from your position, assuming you're confirmed?
Senator, you're absolutely right. Death by suicide is a huge concern with veterans, and the biggest challenge I've seen is when veterans transition, it's that sense of purpose. It's being able to find their niche when the military is gone and they're out, and it's just so incredibly vital. Partnership with the Department of Defense is key because, as you can see, veteran families, we usually raise more veterans or more military. And so being able to work with the Department of Defense, being able to identify any service members who have struggles so that when they transition, we're able to work with them and know, being able to ensure that they know that the VA is there for them is so vital, and that they're not by themselves. We have to break through a little to get to the active duty service members and Guard and Reserve so that they know that VA is a welcoming home for them. But we also have to make sure that we are that welcoming home.
I think one of the things that I believe you brought it up to was the one-stop shop experience. I think that can make a big difference in simplifying their lives and knowing that we have their back.
Yes, Senator.
Once they get out of the military. Last question before I get to Senator Blumenthal. The VA has reached a number of long-awaited agreements with its labor partners. Tell me how these agreements are going to help support the VA of improving recruitment, retention across the enterprise.
Yes, Senator. Exactly. We're super fortunate. We have NNU, Secretary McDonough went down to Durham to sign that for our nurses, and our nurses are a backbone for our healthcare system. So they'll be able to help us with recruiting, help us with retention, and also raise any issues so that we're able to address them before we have a nurse walk out the door. That's why the unions are so vital and important for us to have that communication.
Very good. Senator Blumenthal?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for having this hearing. Sorry to be late getting here, but I appreciated our conversation yesterday and enjoyed it. And as I indicated then, I'm really delighted that you're going to be assuming this position. I think we need this kind of leadership, especially from someone who has your experience, 20 years in the Army, and who knows what it is like to be a female veteran. I know that Senator Murray asked you about plans to improve access to care for our female veterans. And Connecticut, for example, has a new facility for them. But how would you assess the current state of care for female veterans around the country?
We have some locations, Senator, who are doing an amazing job taking care of our women veterans. I do think that we need to ensure that that incredible care is across the board. The VA that I entered 10 years ago, which is down the road, and I out-processed at the VA Medical Center, is totally different than the organization that in 2013 than when I went to visit last year and this year. And so I do think cultural competent care across the board. Every facility has a specialist there, but making sure that it's uniform and that our veterans, our women veterans in particular, feel welcomed in each facility that they enter.
We spoke yesterday about the K-2 veterans and about the need to expand care for our K-2 veterans who worked, as you know, in Uzbekistan at a former Soviet air base, have been exposed to toxic chemicals and potential radiation. Will you commit to working with me to expand care to those veterans and also to secure from the Department of Defense the records that are needed to assess the potential exposure that they have?
Yes, Senator, if confirmed.
Let me ask you about the VA facility in Connecticut. As we discussed yesterday, Secretary McDonough has visited that facility. I hope you will as well. I'm inviting you to come and see it and actually see for yourself the need to rebuild it. It's a 1950s structure, like many across the country, many VA facilities. It has some of the best docs, nurses, staff in the world. They're working with facilities that are out of date, and they are extraordinarily dedicated and expert professionals. But we need the new rebuilding, which is ongoing, new parking garage, new surgery clinic, but the entire facility. So I would suggest that you come see it for yourself. Let me ask you about electronic health record modernization, another topic we discussed. What can be done to make sure that these systems are completed to be interoperable?
Yes, Senator. First and foremost, during the reset, we're going to have to focus on those first 5 sites and make sure that we've listened to our veterans, that we've listened to our clinicians, and that we are able to take those best practices and those concerns and work with Oracle Cerner to make the changes that we need in order to be able to fix the record at those 5 sites. We also need to ensure that the record is scalable so that we can get it deployed to larger sites, including level 1 sites. But we're not going to do anything until it is fully ready to go. We'll work with the firm. I'll work with, if confirmed, also our EHR team and Department of Defense, the JEC, to ensure that we have those changes and that we have the healthcare record our veterans deserve.
Thank you. I want to, again, thank you for your service and thank your family for their support and their service, and look forward to working with you. Thank you for taking this very, very important position. Look forward to working with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
Senator King.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome to the committee. Nice to see you this afternoon. As you know, one of the issue I've been involved with is domiciliary care in veterans' homes generally. We passed a statute on this. It's now been 28 months. We still don't have a rule, and I would appreciate a timeline to get that done. 28 months is too long for a rule, and by the way, that rule should be retroactive given the time that's elapsed. This is a real hardship to our veterans' homes, something like $3 million a year being lost because they're doing the right thing by taking care of veterans with dementia. So I hope you'll attend to that issue.
Yes, Senator, if confirmed, I would definitely.
Thank you. Number two, I know various people have talked about the electronic medical records. I want you to be really obnoxious on this contract. I don't know if you have it in you, but try, because so far we haven't held the contractor to their obligations. I know it's been changed to a year to year. That gives us substantial leverage. I hope you'll use it, because if we have specific goals in terms of metrics, approval rating by the users, all of those kinds of things, timeliness, lack of crashes, and if they're not meeting them, there should be penalties, and that should be part of the contract. They should have costs if they don't meet those metrics. I'm concerned that we're sort of drifting through this process and not holding the contractors accountable. There's billions of dollars at stake here, taxpayers' money. This has been a drama that we really ought to be bringing to a close. So I want you to call on your inner bear to go after this issue.
Senator, I'm a mother of three from ages 23 to 17. I have bear in me, and I'm happy.
You know what I'm talking about.
Yes, Senator.
I'm serious, though.
I agree. I
Contract.
don't mean to make light, but absolutely, it's vital for our veterans.
Thank you.
Senator King, I might add that she just told me earlier that she ain't afraid of people with stars on their shoulders either.
Thank you, sir. Transition. I'm going to be submitting several amendments to the National Defense Authorization Act on the Armed Services Committee. One would be to change the opt-in to an opt-out on notifying the state veterans service officer on the DD 2648. That's number one, because now only 15% of transitioning veterans opt in. And the whole idea of transition is to have somebody there to welcome them. But we can't do that if we don't know who they are and that they're coming. That's number one. Number two, we would allow transitioning veterans to enroll in the VA before they actually leave, so that there's an enrollment that takes place before they leave service. They can maybe even set up appointments. And the third amendment is to make the Department of Labor a full member of the Joint Executive Committee. Now they're kind of an advisory. I think they ought to be involved. Can you support those three amendments?
Yes, Senator.
Thank you. I'll relay that to the Armed Services Committee. And finally, and I think this question may have come up, women veterans are still reporting to me that they don't feel fully empowered in the VA system. They're 11% now. There'll be 20% in a few years. Can we somehow deal with that issue to be sure that our VA system adequately represents the interests of female veterans?
Yes, Senator. That would be one of my key goals.
Thank you.
If confirmed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll yield back.
Well, I want to thank the committee members for being here. I want to thank the nominee for being here. And I appreciate your very direct answers to the questions and not filibustering. And I mean that. Thank you. I think it speaks to you as a person. I would ask that any of the questions that are put forth to the committee be at the clerk no later than 5 p.m. on Friday. in with that.
Senator, can I correct the record? I apologize. I did make an error when I was talking to Senator Tuberville. The new enrollees for PACT Act population is 84,000. I apologize. I said 800,000, so it was my error. I apologize.
Let the record reflect that correction. All right? Thank you for being here. Thank your family for being here. And I would love to give you a timeline on when we hope to kick you out of committee, but let's just put it this way, we'll do it as quickly as we possibly can. This hearing's adjourned.